all you meddling kids, it's your girl Pammy Chanel back with another video. So today we're going to talk about the Netflix documentary Take Care of Maya. And before we begin, I want to tell you a little bit about my medical history, just a little bit because a lot, but I'm going to tell you a little bit. I suffer from a condition called HS. I had my first abscess or boil when I was 10 years old, and they were reoccurrent. So that means that when one would drain, then another one would pop up in another place. Doctors told me that I was just going to have to deal with it. I was going to have to be on antibiotics, and I was going to have them lanced, and so on and so on. It wasn't until I was 36 years old, 26 years later, that a doctor actually diagnosed me with HS. A dermatologist that actually knew what he was looking at and what he was doing. And I will always thank this doctor because nobody had given me a diagnosis. Nobody had told me what was wrong with me. And I walked around most of my childhood and my young adulthood thinking I was a freaking freak, that something was wrong with me because I had this disease and nobody else around me had it that I knew of. So in watching this documentary, it really I wish I had a mother who knew how to advocate as much as this mother knew how to advocate for her child. Not saying that my mother was not there for me for every lance, not there trying to ask questions, but she just didn't have the medical knowledge in order to ask. And I just wish I had that because I may have been diagnosed sooner. I wish we had the internet back then because I know I probably would have been diagnosed sooner. Anyway, let's get into the documentary. So the documentary is about this former firefighter, or retired firefighter, named Jack Kowalski and his wife, Beata. And they had a daughter named Maya, and they loved this child. This is their firstborn child. She wanted a child really, really badly. And Beata is originally from Poland. And her parents came over here, and she learned how to speak English. And when teachers told her she wasn't going to be nothing, she ended up becoming a nurse. And like I said, she really wanted to have a child. They have their daughter, Maya, and then they work on a son named Kyle 2 years later. In 2015, Maya becomes sick, having shortness of breath, coughing with mucus, and her legs began bending, which is a sign of dystonia. Whenever she moved her legs or hands, she had extreme pain. Now, any good parent would take their child to the doctor, which is what they did. And most of the doctors that she took her child to, they dismissed it as anxiety, that her daughter was faking her symptoms or, was all in her head. Now, because her mother was a nurse, her mother was extremely thorough in documenting doctor's visits. And I'm pretty sure she was thorough because she knows that doctors can be really, really shitty. I'm not going to censor myself on this one, y'all. I'm going to say the curse words I want to say because when we get to end this, you're going to be probably as angry as I am. So through research, she found Dr. Kilpatrick's clinic, and he diagnosed her daughter with CRPS, which is complex regional pain syndrome. She received treatments of ketamine for therapy, but the low dosage ketamine was ineffective. Now, I know when we think about ketamine, we think about it being a street drug, and we think about people going into a K-hole and all this other stuff, but it can be used in treatments. Now, this was revolutionary for the time because this is 2015. A lot of people don't know a whole lot about ketamine during that time. Because it was ineffective, they traveled to Mexico because in America, I'm assuming it was illegal. They traveled to Mexico to put her in a coma so she can receive the ketamine in a higher doses through an IV. This worked. But one of the side effects is that it could cause, hallucinations. By 2016, her condition got worse, and she was admitted to Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital in Pinellas County, Florida. The medical team became suspicious when her mother talked about ketamine treatments. They accused the mother of mistreating Maya and having Munchausen syndrome by proxy. And you're going to hear me say Munchausen by proxy because this is a condition that's been around for a while, and that's how I'm used to saying it. So I'm going to keep it moving. Because the mother wanted to have more ketamine treatments for her daughter. Now, Dr. Sally Smith comes in while her father was there, and she does not let him know that she is from Child Protective Services. So they think she's just another doctor at the hospital. She does a 10-minute interview and leaves. The nurse comes back and says that he has to leave, and his daughter is now a ward of the state. Beata was accused of over-medicating Maya, and they decide to get a lawyer. The lawyers discover who the doctor really works for, which is Pinellas County's Department of Social Services, where kids are 2.5 times more likely to be removed from their home than state average. Whereas in the 70s, when CPS was first established, or kind of what really took off, because we've always had some form of it, it focused on kids who were beaten, had SA, neglect, but now we also have medical abuse, where parents who may be unhappy with the doctors or trying to find a doctor to give them an accurate diagnosis can be accused of doctor or hospital shopping because the mom has a mental issue, or because they feel like the father is actually doing something to the child. Now, Dr. Kilpatrick reached out to Dr. Smith, but she doesn't mention him in her original findings. Under the deposition, though, she acts like she doesn't remember him telling her that removing the child will cause the family distress, even though he says that's what he told her. Her mother was allowed updates, but not allowed to speak with her at first. She was adamant about her child not suffering. And when you go back and watch this documentary, you're going to hear Beata speak to these nurses. And I want to talk to you guys a little bit about us Southerners down here. And because I'm from the South, I'm from North Carolina, I'm from the South. If you don't talk to us with that Southern gentility that we allegedly supposed to have, especially if you're from up north, or even if you're from another country, we will see it in some ways as being harsh, when that's just your culture. And being that Beata was from Poland, I would just see that as her being, just that's just the way she talks. But a lot of people will get offended by that. And I think some of that played a role in what happens later on, and just the investigation in itself. But moving on, when I heard her say that she didn't want her child to suffer, I broke down in tears. I'm not even going to sit here and lie to you guys, because as a mother, that's like the only reaction I could have, because you hear that mother, you hear her pain, and you hear her thinking about her child, and the fact of knowing that her child is in pain is causing both of them pain. But her father was trying to get her to, stop talking to them about giving her pain meds. He said that she was like harassing them. And you even hear her young son, Kyle, saying, please, mommy, listen to daddy. But I think Beata, in all of her knowledge as a nurse and all of her being as a mother, she knew that those doctors were not doing her daughter right. During the shelter hearing, which is like one of the first hearings you go through when it comes down to your child being taken away from the state, they hear about what the doctor says and what allocations have been made, and they don't have to have any actual proof at this point. The judge does the placement. Now, when Beata hears that her daughter is going to stay at that hospital and is going to remain a ward of the state, she collapses and hits her head, especially when the judge says no contact. So she puts in a no contact order. They had Beata evaluated, and she was identified as a person who did not have Munchausen syndrome, but was suffering through depression from having her child removed. And this is what a psychologist said. A psychologist that the state ordered her to go to, not one that she paid for, but one they ordered her to go to. They're sitting here telling you she doesn't have Munchausen. But here we go. According to Maya, no one told her why she could not see her mom. And her father, who was allowed visitation, was not allowed to tell the mother anything about Maya's treatment. So that house was very tense. Now, doctors tried to claim that Maya had improved at the hospital, but according to Maya, she said she didn't. Dr. Kilpatrick sent Beata an email talking about the seriousness of her daughter's illness and how they had to get her up, whatever they had to do to get the child treatment, because he knew this child was suffering. Now, eventually, Beata was able to speak with her, but couldn't talk about her health or anything about the case. And she had a social worker in there with her at all times when she spoke to her mother. The same social worker. And the social worker's name was Kathy Beatty. And this social worker just happened to have been arrested for child abuse charges. They were dropped, but it worried Beata, because here's someone who was arrested. Now, Beata hadn't been arrested at this point. Here's someone who's been arrested, who's working with children, who's with her child. She has no say-so whether this person with her child or not. But the state has said this person is okay to be around her child. According to Maya, she made her sit in her lap. She took pics of her in a sports bra and shorts while she was screaming, Beatty also tried to get the mother's phone privileges suspended because Maya was complaining about being in the hospital. Now, granted, this child went in the hospital, I think, in October. She missed Halloween. She missed Thanksgiving. And now she's missing Christmas with her mother. The husband is interviewed by an officer who, at this point, he didn't have any idea his wife was being criminally investigated. He thought this was just routine. He didn't fall for the bait that the officer tried to give him, though, because the officer asked him, would he be able to keep his children away from his wife if she was ordered to have no contact? He said yes, he would. So after this, they do have another hearing in December 2016. Like I said, this child has been away from her mother since October. And during this heated hearing, because it was very, very heated, because another attorney had came in and she was like, this is unfreaking constitutional, which in my opinion, it was. Maya's attorney, because in any kind of case like this, the parents may have an attorney, then you have the DA, and then you have the attorney for the child. And the attorney asked the judge if Maya could hug her mother. She just wanted to hug her mother. And that douchebag judge said no. Now, I want y'all to keep up with me because I'm giving y'all these months for a reason. October, November, December. This child is away from her mother during key points of her life. She done missed her birthday with her mother. She's missed everything. And the last thing that she asked this judge, and yeah, I'm getting a little emotional. The last thing she asked this judge is could she hug her mother? And the judge says no. So on January 6th, of 2017, they were scheduled to go to a birthday party. Beata said she had a headache and couldn't go. When her husband came home, he thought she was asleep, so he didn't bother her. He didn't even go in a room. He just went up there in his little living room area and watched TV with his son. Her brother came over, went into the garage, and found Beata. She unalived herself by hanging. The documentary shows messages between doctors. One said, and I quote, "Ketamine girl's mom unalived herself yesterday," end quote. Then he said, quote, "I had another mother do the same thing," end quote. These are the people that we are going to in our most vulnerable moments, putting our children's lives in their hands. And number one, he didn't even refer to Maya by her name. He called her ketamine girl. And number two, he brushed off Beata's suffering, which, just makes me angry. But moving on. After her mom's death, the court allowed the father to get a second opinion in Rhode Island, which confirmed Maya has complex regional pain syndrome. With these findings being sent to the court, she was finally released from her prison, from her kidnappers. This child was in custody for 92 days. The court denied her any ketamine treatments. These are the conditions of her being released. But I'm sure they gave her narcotics. I'm sure she had a little oxy, maybe some tramadol, which I know is not a narcotic, but should be. I'm pretty sure they gave her some things that will be considered addictive, but we're gonna just brush that aside for the moment. The father talks about not being able to replace their mother and how it's kind of like a dark cloud over their family. It's very hard to move on. Then it cuts to reporter Daphne Chen, who in 2019 stumbles upon the case while investigating the operations of Child Protective Services. She started digging and interviewing the family and Dr. Smith. She also noticed the differences between what the other doctors had said, including Dr. Kilpatrick and the doctor from Rhode Island and another doctor that she had seen, who all diagnosed her, compared to what Dr. Smith had saw. Posted her article, and then people began coming out of the woodwork reaching out to her. She found so many victims, including Vivian Graham, John Stewart, Ashley Finnegan, Carolyn Bryan, parents who sent their children to the doctor or emergency rooms and then were under investigation. Their kids would come in with one condition or with certain type of symptoms, and then the doctor would tell them, oh, your child has broken bones, or your child has bleeding on the brain, etc. The common denominator here was Dr. Sally Smith and John Hopkins All's Children's Hospital. She saw them for about 10 minutes. This starting to sound a little familiar, huh? And then Vivian's husband was arrested for child abuse. The Finnegans were arrested and their kids placed in foster care. John Stewart was arrested. There was an investigation against Carolyn Bryan, but it doesn't specifically say whether or not she was arrested or not, or whether it was just her husband. She does talk about how they tried to play one against the other. Now, Maya's family decides to sue, and thanks to Beata having so much documentation, she recorded every phone call. She wrote notes. Her documentation was immaculate. And them having a little bit of money they were able to sue. Now, I'm going to put all of this together towards the end. I promise you, I'm going to come back to this. But most parents enter into a case plan, which is a series of things a parent has to do to get their child back. This includes psych evaluations, proof of employment, drug testing, parenting classes, and so on. Many people do this because they think this is the only way they can get their kids back. If you sign it, you release the hospital or the person who makes these allegations against you of all liability. Beata did not do this. She did not sign it. And this is the only way they could sue. Within the investigation, her attorneys found the hospital charged the insurance company for 3 months of treatment for the exact condition they said this child did not have. Now, as of today, Dr. Smith and the Suncoast Center, which is the organization that is, I guess, houses that county's social services, settled out of court. They settled in 2021. But the lawsuit against the hospital is still ongoing. It had been stalled. And now it's been set for September of 2023, which I definitely will be watching this case play out closely. The hard part for me was watching this family be devastated at the news that the case against the hospital was going to be delayed. Her brother says it's never going to end, which just fucking sucks, because this child we never talk about, I want to talk about Maya, and I want the focus to be on Maya, but that Kyle has to feel some kind of way, and he's human. He has to. He's the youngest. His sister is sick. His mother is gone. His father is probably depressed, and he's having to deal with this. And it's hard for a young child. It's hard for an adult to process all of this stuff that happened in this case. The documentary ends with Maya reading a letter dedicated to her mother. And that's where it gives all the information about how the hospital doesn't make any, at the end, the rolling credits, how Dr. Smith declined to comment, and the hospital, doesn't want to talk about an open case. The judge, gave their sob story about how they used the information that they had instead of their common sense. But let me get into my rant. After watching the documentary, I looked up Dr. Smith and saw that she was also involved in another high-profile case involving a Black family whose child was taken out of their custody when they took their child to the hospital because he was not getting the proper nutrients that he needed from breastfeeding, and they were trying to see what was going on before they started shoving, formula down their child's mouth. Dr. Smith was involved in that, as well as the same hospital. Why has she not been taken off of the hospital's website yet? Why didn't she lose her license? Because the first thing they always talk about as being doctors, first do no harm. How harmful to a child who is not being abused is it to rip them away from the only family they've ever known and either lock them up in a hospital, which is pretty much what happened to Maya, or put them with a strange family? I am not saying that all doctors are bad. I am not saying that all hospitals are bad. What I'm saying is, parents, do your research. When you move in an area, do your research on the doctors that are at that hospital. Do a research on the doctor that you have for your child's pediatrician. Get reviews from other parents. Look at the bad reviews first, then move on to the good ones. That's how I like to do things. Look at the bad reviews first, and if the bad reviews outweigh the good reviews, then yeah, I'm gonna not take my child there. But as a mandated reporter, which I am because I'm an educator, I don't have to have proof of abuse. I just have to suspect, and it's mandated by law that I report. I make sure that I have reason to suspect. I have not had to call CPS on a lot of families, thank God. There are other teachers that have had to do so. And it's not a thing to take lightly if you are a mandated reporter, which is why I don't understand why people are allowed to report anonymously, because that causes a whole nother problem within itself. But I'm going to try to stay on topic because that might be for another video. I hope that the Kowalski family can take that hospital to the bank. I hope that they get reimbursement for the insurance charges that they charged on them for their daughter having the disease they said that she did not have. I hope that they get enough money to make doctors and the hospital really reevaluate the system that they have in place currently, or that they did have in place during that time. And I also hope that this story encourages doctors to really come in the hospital room and stay for a little bit longer than 10 minutes. I know you have other patients, but at least talk to these people enough to get to know them. I don't think any of those doctors did that, because I think had they talked to Beata, and just from me listening to her and listening to the things that she said in recordings, this was not a mother that was trying to hurt her child. This was a mother who was trying to keep her child from being in pain. And I don't think anything tells that to me more is the fact that she gave up her life so that her child could get the proper treatment that she needed. 92 days that child stayed locked up, kidnapped in a hospital room. 92 days. And they said because she can play the piano, she was doing better at the hospital than she was at home. Bullshit. I just feel for this family so much. Losing a parent as a child is hard as it is, but losing a parent in that way under those conditions is even worse. So all of my prayers and positivity definitely goes out to that family. I hope this documentary gets amplified in just as high regard as Shiny Happy People and other documentaries that have really exposed the corrupt systems that we have here in America. And I'm going to say something else. This is a pure example of government overreach, and we need to fix it. And I would say, yeah, let's just blame this on Florida, but it's not happening just in Florida. It's happening everywhere, where these doctors and social services are coming in and just doing what they think is in the best interest of the child, and not listening to parents or even listening to the child. So once again, parents, I ask you, if you're watching this video, do your due diligence and make sure you do your homework on the people that are around your kids, because you never know if you'll be in a situation like the Kowalskis. Phew, guys, this documentary took a lot out of me, probably more than Gloria Vale or even Shiny Happy People. And my emotions are raw right now because I haven't been too long finished watching and doing my little digging on Dr. Smith. Normally at this part of the video, I ask you to like and subscribe, but I'm just happy that you stayed for this long and listened to my rant. Hope you go and watch the documentary. It is on Netflix. It is called Take Care of Maya. And until next time, stay nosy and stay meddling. Bye, guys.